Again, welcome you to NASIG 2020. This session is a multi-institutional model for advancing open access journals and reclaiming the scholarly record. Our presenters will be Karen Bjork of Portland State University, Stuart Bauer from the University of Oklahoma, Tulsa, and Chris Hollister from the University of Buffalo. Please refer to Sketch for a complete biography of our speakers. We will be using the Zoom Q&A for questions during the session. And afterwards, please also participate in our online discussion forum, which can be located at the NASIG website with additional questions or comments about this session. NASIG's Code of Conduct applies to all discussions and presentations. The links to the forum and code of conduct are available on the NASIG website. And please tweet about this session using the hashtag NASIG 2020. And we would also like to thank the NASIG sponsors for helping us make our online conference freely available to everyone.
So hello everybody, my name is Chris Hollister from the University at Buffalo Libraries. My colleagues Stu and Karen and I are delighted to be here today. Thanks very much for the invitation. We do have a lot to share and time's going to go fast, but I wanted to take a moment to reiterate some of the things that Maria just said. I wanted to take a moment to thank the conference organizers for their genuinely heroic efforts in pivoting to an online conference. And thanks also again to the sponsors for their tremendous support and generosity. So there are our sponsors. That slide didn't translate too well, but you get the point. So here we are, a multi-institutional model for advancing open access journals and reclaiming control of the scholarly record. This is a case study about an independent library published journal, its origins, its expansion, and most pertinent to today's discussion, its evolution from one model and platform to another. And for those who are in the scholarly communication business, this is also a success story about regaining some control over the field's scholarly record and about choosing the right partners for doing so. So briefly, my job today is to sort of set the stage. I am going to introduce the journal, give a very brief history, talk about successes and challenges, and then pass the baton along to my colleagues Karen and Stu to detail how and why we got to where we are today and what we learned along the way. So here we go. I am co-founder and co-editor of the journal Communications and Information Literacy, henceforth referred to as CIL. CIL is an independent, library-published, peer-reviewed, and open access journal. Open access in the purest sense, no author fees. CIL publishes research, theory, and practice in the area of information literacy in higher education. The journal launched in 2007, and it is presently in volume year number 14. And as you can see, the journal's reach and visibility is pretty well established in terms of both free web and commercial directories, indices, and archives. Stuart and I commenced with developing CIL over a year before its official launch in 2007. And I want to take a quick moment to say that if there is anyone in the assembled here today who's interested in doing this kind of thing, I highly recommend that you give yourself at least a year so that you can successfully launch. But going back to 2007, at that time, there were no scholarly journals devoted to information literacy. Those of you who have been around long enough will remember the journal Research Strategies ceased publication at that time. And other journals were, of course, publishing papers on information literacy in higher education, but none were held to that particular purview. I think it's fair to say that Stuart and I encountered a fair amount of frustration with our LIS publishing experience at that time. But more importantly, we also recognized what was then the emergent possibilities of open access publishing and potentially regaining some control over the professional literature on information literacy. We think that it's really important to emphasize here that CIL is a values-driven journal. Stu and I are fervent believers in the necessity of advancing information literacy. We value our editorial independence from commercial publishers, universities, and professional societies. We abide by the library field's core principle, free to all. From the outset, we advanced the ideals of professional mentorship, inclusion, and even environmental stewardship. And to this latter point, we were originally hosted on a carbon-free hosting service. And though they're not listed here, I would add that we attribute significant value to sincere professionalism and a word that we need to hear more often these days, to decency. Open access publishing, as we know, usually generates questions about economic models and sustainability, understandably so. CIL's financial needs have always been very modest, mainly used for web hosting fees on our first platform. For the first few years, we operated on the so-called PBS model, that would be plead, beg, and steal. We experimented with print-on-demand services to generate funds, and after a few years, we began to build a modest bank account, thanks very much to vendor royalties. Measures of the journal's success come in a variety of ways. In 2009, we were honored with the ACRL instruction section's special certificate of recognition and appreciation. Thank you very much to our friends at ACRL. And though we certainly recognize the limitations of all impact metrics, we do like to tout our current SJR ranking, which places CIL at number 10 among 227 ranked journals in the library field. That's actually down from number 6 the previous year. And I'd like to take this opportunity to publicly blame my colleagues Karen and Stu for that precipitous fall. Ha ha ha, I feel like I should be inserting a laugh track here. The point that I'd like to make here, I think the key point is that it would have been difficult to imagine, going back to 2006 and 2007, that an independent, library-published, open access journal experiment could achieve this kind of standing when we first began this journey. This can work. So, CIL was originally developed under the umbrella of the University at Buffalo Libraries on the OJS platform. For those who are unfamiliar, that's Online Journal Systems, which served us very well for several years. And for a variety of reasons, mainly practical, the journal moved to Portland State University and its celebrated Digital Commons platform, PDX Scholar. We simply no longer had the capacity to manage the ongoing growth of CIL with its original publishing model. For those who may have some preconceived notions about digital commons, you should know that our big move preceded Elsevier's acquisition of bPress, and accordingly our memo of understanding is with our friends at Portland State, not Elsevier. But I will add for the public record here that not only our good friends at Portland State University, but also our good friends at bPress have been amazing partners in this enterprise. So at this point, I'd like to pass the baton to my dear friend and colleague, Karen at Portland State University. Karen?
Great. Great. Thank you so much. I hope everyone can hear me okay. So I am going to just give a brief history of our journal publishing journey here at Portland State. So we actually migrated from DSpace to Digital Commons in July of 2013. And with the migration to Digital Commons, we gained the capability to provide services that supported publishing. So this was a new adventure for us at the time, and we really wanted to strategically think about what publishing services we can provide to editors and what services we'd like to provide to editors. And what was the level of staffing that would be needed to support the editors in order to ensure that they can be successful. So we now host 5 active journals, 2 that are faculty run and 3 that are student editor journals. Our goal at PSU Library is to publish sustainable journals. So before agreeing to host a journal, my team has several conversations with future editors about what it means to publish a journal. We do this to gather an understanding of the editor's publishing knowledge, as well as to start forming a relationship. Journal publishing hosting is really a relationship between the editors and us as the hosting platform. There is a lot of conversation and a lot of work that goes in to ensure that the journals are able to successfully publish, and it really starts at that very beginning. So our goal is to really actively try to talk people out of publishing. So this seems harsh, but as Chris said in his introduction, it took them a year before they launched. And we really want to make sure that editors have fully thought through the level of work that it takes to publish a journal. And a lot of the work actually falls on the editor's shoulders. So we want them to be able to make sure that they have an understanding that they have not only an understanding of the level of work, but they also have people to support them and editors to help them out. While we can provide help in sort of the back end and providing guidance, we as hosting, sort of the hosting part of it, do not provide sort of the editorial, we don't provide editing services. It's really based on the editors. So before a journal can start, they must sign an agreement and have policies that meet a directory of open access requirements. So this slide doesn't actually capture all of the requirements, but it's really more of a snapshot of what we expect editors to think through and decide on before they get started. So this includes the scope of the journal, the staffing model, and the really important part of the staffing model is the succession plans, and in particular with our student-run journals. As we all know, editors rotate on and off, and we really want to make sure that the journal has fully thought through how they're going to train new editors. The journal publishing is really a small chunk of time from when new editors come in to when a journal actually needs to get published. So we want to make sure that there's that smooth transition and that it doesn't actually, the journal doesn't flounder because the editors are not trained or well trained enough. For student-run journals, they must have an advisor and a departmental support. This is really key, and we have found that this is our way to keep our student journals continuously publishing. All of our journals must have a peer-reviewed methodology. And with the guiding principles, what we mean by formatting requirements is, have they identified who will do the work? Will it be the authors or the editors? And are they requiring, if they're requiring the authors to do the work, who's going to do the quality control? All of our journals are open access, so they must all have Creative Commons license. Also, we require that authors think about corrections and retractions, as well as how would they potentially handle plagiarism. Next slide, please. So in early 2016, I was approached by a CIL editor who was affiliated with Portland State, and that was Bob Schroeder. So the CIL editors were looking at the possibility of moving out of OJS. And so we spent the first few months sort of exploring what a partnership would look like, how the migration would work, and how much work would it take. We also spent the time getting to know each other. This was the first time many of us had met, let alone worked with one another. So knowing that Bob was going to retire from PSU in the next couple of years, and also knowing that editors rotate on and off, the library really needed to ensure that we were okay with hosting and providing services to non-PSU affiliated editors. So until we were approached by CIL, our policy was to host PSU faculty edited journals. We really had not explored offering our hosting services to editors that were not affiliated with Portland State. We also needed to verify that the journal editors were okay with having their journal connected to PSU after the PSU affiliated editor retired. So we were approached, as I said, in early June of 2016. We signed the MOU in March of 2017. So during that 9-month period, the library thoughtfully updated its publishing policies and our editor agreement. We had multiple conversations with the editors talking about what our system can and cannot do, what a migration would look like, what services we were going to offer, and we had all of that hashed out before the MOU or our agreement was signed. And I felt that this was really important because we needed to establish what our partnership was going to look like before we started our partnership. I really didn't want to provide any level of false expectations. So the library took on the responsibility of migrating CIL and the back content to PDX Scholar. I will say I did not do this alone. I had a team behind me, and I'm really fortunate to have a member of my unit who assists me with our conferences and journal hosting services, and she actually did a huge chunk of the work to migrate the journal. So I cannot take sole credit for that at all. So in order to migrate the past volumes and the issues, the CIL editors needed to provide us with access to their OJS backend. We needed to understand how OJS worked before we could actually go and migrate the content. So we started this migration in March and we completed it in December. And as you can see, we migrated 10 volumes, which was 196 items. We felt that migrating the journal content was an essential service that the library should be offering to editors. And during this migration period, we also finalized the new journal site and trained the editors on the new system. And all of this was completed by December of 2017. We really wanted to make sure that the CIL editors could start publishing in the following year, in January of 2018. So it was crucial and key for us to get everything up and ready during that time. Next slide, please. So I'm showing you this slide for a reason. Migration is a complex process, and this slide really demonstrates how much was involved. So we worked with our library technologies team to set up and establish the migration process. We had a sandbox instance of the journal and used the sandbox to train the editors and to test the migration process. My team handled steps 1 through 4, and the library tech team handled 5 through 6. And as I had said previously, the editors provided us access to their OJS backend, so my staff had to quickly familiarize themselves with the system because we needed to conduct metadata cleanup in OJS before we could migrate. Next slide, please. So the logistical challenges. Communication. Communication is always listed as a challenge. For us, this was a new relationship and a new partnership, and as I had mentioned previously, I did not know Chris or Stu. I'd never worked with them before, and they were entrusting us to successfully migrate their journal and then continue a long-term partnership with hosting their journal. And it really felt very important to me to set up clear paths of communication. We really wanted to ensure that we could deliver on what we had promised. In some respects, I felt like our reputation was on the line. CIL is still a very well-known journal. And the last thing I wanted to do was upset the editors or have them believe that they were lulled into some system that, you know, couldn't do what they were expecting it to do. So we quickly decided on a point person, and we clearly communicated expectations. And again, like I said, we really focused on what our system can and cannot do. We felt that this was really important. So the migration timing was also really important to think about. We wanted to make sure that we had closed all article acceptance, so CIL was not going to be accepting any new articles during the time of migration. We also wanted to verify that all of the articles that were in their system were out of review. We also wanted to keep the OJS version of the journal up as long as possible. We really saw it was important to sort of have that OJS version up there until we knew that the migration was successful. So when you migrate to a new system, I cannot encourage you enough, or, you know, sort of focus enough on this, is reaching out into the community is key. We really had no idea what we were doing. I sort of had never migrated from OJS to Digital Commons. I was just overwhelmed initially. And I went and reached out to our community. I reached out to the Digital Commons community, the LPC, and received a ton of support. And really, that community is what sort of allowed me to really think through and map out, because I learned from them. When we migrated to our new system, we also had to realize that the download counts were going to restart at 0. So Stu is actually going to talk about this in a lot more detail, but we needed to create a metadata field that pulled the download count for each article in OJS, because we wanted to retain an overall download count of all articles. We also needed to make sure that our issue dates lined up and that dates lined up. It's funny how actually dates can be one of the most logistical nightmares when migrating, just purely because of the way that dates are put into a system. They're different. You've got, you know, sometimes just a year, sometimes a month, a day, a year, sometimes a day, a month, a year. And so we really needed to make sure we were consistent with all of that. We also needed to transfer and update the metadata that was in the DOAJ. So we actually needed to override the DOIs, because what we had discovered was CIL was creating DOIs, but they actually were not Crossref members. Portland State is a Crossref member, so we had to essentially create all new DOIs for the journal, and then we had to go through and update the DOAJ to ensure that the journal was redirecting to our new system. And actually last year we created a basic tool that allows the library to input and update data in the DOAJ automatically, and this really saves the editors a ton of time, because before the tool, the editors were actually manually entering the metadata in the DOAJ. Training all the editors was extremely important. We created shared documentation, we provided a sandbox instance for testing, and the training happened at the same time as the migration. So when the journal was ready to go live, so were the editors. We also needed to make sure that all of the reviewer information that was in OJS actually came across into our new platform as well. So it was really important, because CIL already had a great list of reviewers that they had used. They didn't want to lose that information. So that was also a point of focus, was to make sure that that information also got transferred over. And then finally, the journal design. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to capture the editor's vision and really translate that to web design. And again, communication was key to making sure that all stakeholders were happy with the overall look and feel of the journal. And it took, you know, I was surprised at how smoothly the migration was. But a lot of that really came down to the initial time that we took before we decided to take on CIL, and to really think through a lot of things before we actually had any of the agreements signed. I think that those initial conversations were really key to ensuring that our migration was smooth. Next slide, please. And I'm going to actually hand it over to my colleague, Stu.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for everything, honestly. I was trying to figure out how I wanted to say this, and I still don't have the words for it, but hopefully everybody listening to this has a feel for just the incredible weight of this burden that Karen and her team at Portland State took on so beautifully, and managed to handle so much of this incredible workload of migrating our journal from its old platform at OJS to the new platform on bpress. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the loose threads. These are just bits and pieces that you go through a large scale process like this, and you start looking around at the final product and going, you know, we need to make a few updates, a few corrections. What you're looking at here is just an email message that's automatically generated by the system. One of my graduate assistants was given the responsibility for going through the entirety of the collection of articles and fixing middle names and middle initials. For some reason, middle names, middle initials didn't automatically transition over from OJS to bpress just as a matter of the differences between the two platforms, and was something that actually had to be fixed manually. So one of the graduate assistants who works for me here at the University of Oklahoma volunteered, but I gave her instruction and worked with her so that she would go through each article individually on the old OJS site to check and see if there were middle initials assigned to the author names, compare those against bpress, and in those instances where she found that a middle name or middle initial was missing, to go into the metadata and add those manually. Every time that a middle initial or middle name was fixed, it first of all generated an email message like the one that you see here that was then sent out to all of the editors. So during the course of this process, we were certainly kept very much up to date on what was going on. But it also gave us a place to document the rationale behind any change that was made to the metadata, kind of a metadata. If there are corrections that are made, you put in a reason for that update. And you'll notice that here in the middle of this, it's noted as fixing middle name / initial as the rationale for that change. Getting all of those emails can be a little bit annoying, but it is one of the changes into this new system that we're getting used to, is that bpress alerts you about every little thing that goes on. And in some regards, that's actually a good thing, because we're much more aware of what's going on inside bpress. Chris, I think next slide, please. So Karen had mentioned about download counts, and this was also something that we needed to address. In OJS, the download counts are tracked, of course, and this ends up being an important piece of data that is often requested of us by authors of articles. If an author, is a faculty member and they are being put forward for promotion or tenure or something else, they might really want to be able to document, okay, well, the article that I published in CIL has been downloaded over 3,000 times. That's a good metric to be able to share. And so we wanted to make certain that we had tracked that. Of course, when you move to a new platform, the counter essentially resets to 0. The new platform does not have any downloads for a new article that's just been migrated over. So what you see here on the left-hand side is from OJS, the original platform at the top. It says downloads prior to this publication. There was, in fact, a field that was created by the folks at Portland State inside bpress for us to document the number of downloads. And again, that information had to be manually entered. So again, a graduate assistant went through every article, looked at OJS's download count, and then typed in that number into the bpress platform. However, bpress was also at that time calculating its own list of downloads. How many times had the article been downloaded on the new platform? And you'll see highlighted underneath that, we've got 18 downloads since November 13th of 2017. So for this one article, we had 3,332 original downloads, 18 downloads afterwards. The 18 downloads, that count is actually published, and that's on the final page, the product at Portland State on bpress. But the downloads prior to the publication was not originally noted anywhere. We first went back and forth with the folks at bpress trying to find a way if there was a way to add the two numbers together. Frankly, to post one number that said total number of downloads for this publication. In the end, what we've got is much more granular. It actually displays the number of downloads prior to publication on bpress, and then also the number of downloads since it's been published on bpress. This is actually a better solution in that it discriminates between the two different download counts, but gives anyone an opportunity to look and say, oh, okay, this is the number of times holistically that this publication has been downloaded. It's one of the kinds of compromises that we've had to make, but in the end, a lot of these compromises have actually ended up being to the betterment of the journal and have ended up, as I've indicated here, with much more granular data that we've been able to use and share with our authors and with readers and others. Chris, next slide, please. Now, Karen talked a little bit about the DOAJ problem, and unfortunately, I feel like I sort of need to pass this back to her right now to get the full story here. We know that when we were originally doing OJS, we were trying to have DOIs for the articles, but we never were able to quite get a full linkage between the old OJS platform and the folks at Crossref. And so the DOIs never really worked. Thanks to our arrangement with Portland State, we're now able to have completely new DOIs that have been generated for all of the articles in the system. This, however, led to us needing to completely revise our entry in DOAJ and all of the indexing that had been done in DOAJ up to that point. This was able to be accomplished by one download, but then unfortunately, we had to update the metadata from that point forward manually. And Karen, I was hoping you'd talk a little bit more about the tool that you developed that's now allowing that process to be automated.
Sure. So I can't take credit for the creation of the tool. It was actually done through our library technologies team, but we essentially are able to download the spreadsheet of the metadata through our Digital Commons instance. And through the DOAJ API, we can actually go through and push all that metadata into DOAJ. We have part of the tool allows for the metadata to, as it's going into the DOAJ, it actually will check to verify to make sure that everything lines up. So when we initially ran the tool, because of the manual entry that the editors had been doing, we discovered that there was errors in the metadata. So misspelling of names, misspelling of institutions. So we had to go through and update and verify that all of that was occurring. And then to answer your question in regards to the DOIs, in order to generate and create a DOI, you actually need to be a member of Crossref. And so while you can create DOIs yourself, if you don't actually have that membership agreement, you are not able to have them linked through Crossref. So we are Crossref members. So we actually are able to generate DOIs through our Crossref membership. And so when we went and discussed DOIs with the editors, we also needed to make sure, because part of our Crossref number indicates that Portland State is the publisher. So we needed to make sure that the editors were okay with having that indication and affiliation with PSU. So that was the main reason why we needed to, and why we were able to generate the DOIs and the cleanup process that needed to happen for that. Does that answer your question, Stu?
It does, thank you. And just to be clear, you know, the old OJS platform, there were no DOIs. We were never able to generate any actual DOIs from that. And so as a result, I don't believe there are any links out there floating around that are somehow no longer accurate, because the only DOIs of record are those that were produced by Portland State.
Yes,
So.
and the old DOIs would actually throw an error. So you never actually got to the original article if you attempted to put in the DOI that CIL initially had or originally had created. Yeah.
So I think with that, we can move to the next slide, Chris, but at this point, we're kind of wrapping up with the talk and thanking everyone and asking if there are additional questions. And I'm kind of looking over at the Q&A list. If it's appropriate, we'll go ahead and start answering some of these. I feel like I can at least take a stab at the one that's asking, if it's appropriate, can you provide more details about what prompted the move from OJS to Digital Commons? And I need to clarify one thing. The OJS instance that we were running was not in fact hosted at University at Buffalo. It was hosted on an independent web host that we were paying for. That's that comment about the carbon neutral hosting was done through a group called Green Geeks, and OJS was actually paying for web hosting, paying for that platform. The major, well, there were a number of factors that facilitated the move. I'll talk about the technological one, which was that we were having a very, very hard time keeping OJS up to date. The platform that we were using was shifting from versions of PHP that's necessary to run OJS. It was running a very old version of PHP. It needed to move to a more recent version of PHP, and we simply could not get OJS to update correctly. We were running into huge technological issues, and frankly, it was a bit of a house of cards and a bit of a security issue as well, at which point we began looking for partners. And Chris, if you want to talk about that, I'd be happy for you to.
Well, yeah, I could do this real quick. If you remember back in those days, we had 3 co-editors in chief. We still do, but Bob Schroeder, who Karen mentioned earlier, has since retired. Anyway, we decided back in 2016 that these issues that Stu just described had gotten to the point where it was going to be necessary for us to investigate other options, other platforms. And we all did. And Bob came back with the option of potentially moving to Portland State. He had early conversations with Karen about that. We explored a number of other options, but this one was the one that made the most sense for us for a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons were it was immediately obvious that we were going to work together well. We liked what we saw in the Digital Commons platform. We liked what we saw. We really liked what we saw in the PDX Scholar platform. And it was certainly evident that we were going to need to have some back-end technical support, which Portland State was offering. So these are some of the main reasons for the move.
I'm just trying to look over the other questions here, Chris, Karen. I think the question about, can you please share some information about the MOU? That seems like you, Karen.
Yes, I was actually just pulling it up on my screen. So our MOU is really focused on the hosting relationship and what we agree as a university or a library and sort of what CIL agrees as editors. So some of the key points is that, you know, we at Portland State University Library are going to provide access to PDX Scholar. We will provide free hosting services, and that we, you know, will provide free and open access to the content of the journal for as long as the resources are hosted on PDX Scholar. And really the key part of this is that in an event that the decision to discontinuing hosting services, provided with the publisher that we give them 6 months notice. But on the flip side, it's also that if CIL wants to discontinue their services with us, that they would also give us 6 months notice. The other thing we also put into our MOU, or technically I'm supposed to call it an agreement, is that if CIL does decide to move away from our platform, that we will actually hold the archives. So while we migrated to all the content from OJS to Digital Commons, we have decided that with this agreement that we would keep all the content if CIL editors decided to move off of our platform and away from our hosting service, that we would actually keep the back content here at Portland State. And so that, you know, that was a lot of discussions that we had with the editors, but we just felt that, you know, we had put, we just really felt that the having and maintaining the archives was really important for us.
If Chris doesn't say this, I will. I think too that for the editors and the team behind CIL, the journal, our partnership is with Portland State. We very much feel confidence in that partnership. We've been working with them now for a few years with Karen and her team, and it has worked out brilliantly for us and can't imagine having better partners.
You're here.
Thank you. We've enjoyed working with you.
Chris, there's a call to arms on here. Do you see this?
I do not.
It says university presses in partnership with library publishing units would be natural partners in forming a consortium to publish a robust list of scholarly journals that compete with the products of commercial publishers. I know that we belong to a couple of relatively informal publishing groups that we get some emails and such from.
Yeah, I think definitely another hour-long conversation we could have.
There is a question, and maybe Chris and Stu could take this. They want to ask about what the role, if any, do you think large public research libraries might be able to play in publishing or hosting OA journals?
Good question. I mean, we did not have the capacity at the University at Buffalo, which is a large public research university institution, to host or to support CIL once we first got started. I think that would have been our default option. It has to do with, I guess it all comes down to available resources, and that's going to be an even greater challenge moving forward for obvious reasons.
I'll say too, we investigated it at the time for using University of Oklahoma, but the migration itself was going to cost money to manage to do that. And I think it speaks volumes about Portland State and their commitment to the world of open access and open access publishing, that they assumed that responsibility and took that on themselves. And, for a journal like ours, where there really is no budget to speak of, that was huge for us.
Yeah, for those, I'm sorry, Karen, I just want to say this to kind of, for those who have not yet explored PDX Scholar, please do so. It is a remarkably excellent platform.
And I did also want to say, from Portland State perspective in taking on journals, we saw it as part of a priority. So the digital initiatives unit that I am head of did not actually exist until I was hired on. And with the expansion of what we've been doing with our journal publishing, I've also been able to expand my unit as a group. So I now have 5 people that work within digital initiatives, and that is journal publishing, conference hosting, all of that is part of what we do and what we see as really important. So as both Stu and Chris said, it really is based on resources as well as priorities. If it was just me, there's no way I could have done this alone, and there's no way I could continue to do this alone. And so it really, we at Portland State Library really saw it as a service that we could offer to publishers and journal publishers who are really wanting to be able to provide open access to their materials, but didn't have the capacity or bandwidth to be able to offer or to handle the technology as well as the back-end support side. There's a question about if you were aware of any situations with the migration from the old platform to the new, particularly with the lack of truly persistent DOIs, and if that created any problems for the authors. I'm not aware of any. I don't know if Chris or Stu, you were?
I can't think of any instances where that caused a problem. It was, with CIL being our journal baby, we were very sensitive about the potential for that happening, but fortunately it didn't cause any issues, at least none that I'm aware of.
None that I can recall. And certainly the proliferation of the new DOIs are the prominent ones. They're out there, people have easy access to them, and they're working beautifully now. So no, I'm not aware of any issues that we had with the old ones.
I was curious to know about the communication that you provided to the authors before you migrated off of OJS. Did you communicate with authors that had already published, or what did you as a journal do to prepare to allow authors to know about this process?
So Stu, I can do this one if you like. So we do things in a staged way with CIL. So we have an editorial board, and we also have a broader pool of manuscript reviewers. Whenever there is discussion about a big move like this, it always starts with our board. We received overwhelming support from them to move forward. And then we actually had to send out batch communications to our authors. We had to do it in batches because one of the problems we were having with our server host is batch email messages were being blocked as potential spam.
It looks like our time is just about up.
Yes, and I want to thank Karen, Christopher, and Stuart for a wonderful presentation. It was very enlightening. Platform migrations are always a challenge, and the importance of open access publishing and these platforms and the awareness of your approach is just fantastic. It was very informative. Thank you so very much.
No,
I also want to thank, oh, you're welcome. Thank you for doing this, yes. I want to thank everyone for attending this NASIG 2020 session. The recording will be posted on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks, and the speakers will be monitoring the NASIG forum through June 2020 for any questions not covered during the session. Please join us again in approximately 10 minutes for our next session. How do we ensure read institutions can still contribute to a publish-oriented OA ecosystem? Thank you again, everyone.